this information needs to get out there, and the simplicity of it needs to get out there as well, that it's not some crazy, expensive thing. Anybody can do it. Absolutely anybody can do it, really. You always think, well, could it have been something else? But no, it wasn't, because you could really see the gradual changes um, from the work that was happening. And that's why I feel quite passionate about doing this today, actually, with you, because I do think it's so important that this knowledge is out there for people, so that they can not have to live with what we've had to live with, that they can move on with their lives and their kids can move on with their lives.
Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, and we're talking with Maia from the UK. And Maia is somebody who has worked and continues to work with Linda Scottson. And as we've done before, we're going to ask her about the experience before, after, other things that she tried, what it's like to work with Linda, and what kind of results she's gotten with her particular situation. So, welcome, Maia.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. So,
Mm.
can you tell us a little bit about the story? I guess everything boils down to before and after Linda.
Mm. Yeah, so my son, who has had some, well, various issues really, a kind of conglomeration of different things from the start. It kind of began with joint issues, which were really out of the blue, where he couldn't get out of bed in the morning without kind of supporting his weight on his hands. So it took us a little while to kind of notice that there was something wrong, really, actually, because we just thought he was being a bit lazy. So that was how it kind of began. And then we kind of noticed he had a curvature issue. He had sort of some social issues at school. He was in a very small school, so they weren't obvious at first because it was quite an intimate and caring school, really, environment that was actually quite supportive for him. But we kind of noticed, as he grew up, sort of around the age of 5, um, that there was things beginning to constellate that he kind of then knew that we needed to address. Um, So of course we were quite lucky actually. We came to work with a few people who we thought were really knowledgeable, and we didn't really go down a kind of mainstream route because, well, we tried that initially, but it didn't really get us anywhere, to be honest.
Mm.
And we are quite informed about like various different modalities. We're both from therapeutic backgrounds, so really, a lot of people we were speaking to, we could ask the intelligent questions to kind of get answers that didn't really match our expectations. So that's kind of how it began. We worked with various people. We worked with primitive reflexes. Didn't really feel convinced by that, and didn't really get many results or any results from that. And then we kind of went down the route of diet as well. That was quite traumatic and difficult because changing the diet of a 6-year-old is not easy. And you know, um, yeah, I think that it needed to happen anyway. He needed to have a better diet because he was very resistant to pretty much everything, especially meat and vegetables. Um, this is quite typical of a lot of kids on the spectrum, that they won't eat certain texture or sensory foods.
Mm.
So we had to kind of be clever at the ways we would kind of try and reach Isadore, and kind of move around his sort of various resistances
Mm.
towards things. Um, and we were doing exercises for his back, and oh, I mean, lots of different things, but a huge amount of resistance to absolutely everything. Um, Mainly because he doesn't or didn't have a very good concentration span. So getting him to stay in one place for even 2 minutes was incredibly challenging.
Mm.
In fact, it couldn't really happen. So, you know, this is where we began. It was incredibly exhausting and quite depleting, on lots of levels, mentally, emotionally, and stressful. And, you think, oh my God, how's my son gonna, function in a world if he's not eating properly, if he can't, have basic, relationship skills, if he, has this curvature of the spine, which he did have, it was getting worse. I mean, we went to osteopaths too. We tried lots and lots of different things, lots of different things. And then I heard about Linda through somebody random who'd worked with her through the school, actually. And she said, oh, you need to check out this woman down in Forest Row. And actually, we weren't living in Forest Row at the time. We were living in London. So I thought, well, I'm not really, I mean, she's probably just like all the others. I'm not going to travel all the way down to Forest Row at the moment. So I parked it really, and I kept the details, but I just parked it, and then I thought, well, maybe later down the line, if we get super desperate and we want to travel that far, then we might. But as it turned out, we actually ended up moving down to Forest Row about half a year later, and then I remembered, and I was like, oh, you know. It's that lady in Forest Row that I was recommended. So that was the initial meeting, really.
Mm,
At that point, that's when the work kind of began. Yeah,
gotcha, gotcha. So how old was Isadore? It sounds like he was around 6 or 7.
he was about 7 or 8 actually at that
Okay,
point. Yeah, because it was a bit later because the issues had come up when he was about 5, 6, 7. We were still trying to work with it, and then 8 we came down to Forest Row.
gotcha.
So
And we're
yeah.
now we're recording this in October of 2025, and if I recall correctly, I think you mentioned you started with Linda in March of this year.
Yes,
Okay,
seriously, we began in the March. Yes.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So let's see, doing a quick math, through 3, 10, 7 months.
Yeah. So we'd met her a little bit earlier, and I think it was the previous year in sort of November, December. Um, and I was quite impressed with like her knowledge, to be honest. But still, there's two of us in this dynamic, me and my partner, and he wasn't so open to trying anything else because we tried so many different things.
Sure.
And he was like, oh, I'm not sure. And we were both quite fatigued by this point as well. So, it was March when we actually started to really think, okay, maybe we do need to do this and just see if we can, actually get this working as it needs to really work. Because there was a bit of organization and structure that needed to come into place for it to actually, um, you know, fully become something that we could actually integrate into his life. So yeah, so it he went into that situation really um, pretty much with all the issues that he had had for the whole of those sort of 3 to 4 years where we'd been trying different things. Nothing had at all affected anything.
Hmm.
I think actually homeopathy was perhaps something that had helped his back.
Mm.
That was something
Interesting.
we'd had a bit of success with. But certainly
But
we,
otherwise not. It was pretty much everything you tried pretty much led nowhere.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what did what what did Linda say? What got convinced you to?
Well, when you meet Linda, obviously she's incredibly knowledgeable because she's got many years of training and research behind her. So the first thing you get kind of slightly overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge, and you're trying to kind of work out what do I do with this, and there's so much to sort of begin to take on board really because it's actually quite a completely new way, one that you've never really remotely been introduced to at any level through any of the alternative practitioners that we've worked with. I even went back to some and asked them, do you know about this? And, they didn't know about the work of the diaphragm. So that took obviously a little bit of time. Like, do we really trust this? Okay, this is just one person speaking about this. Um, how is it any different? So it took a little while. I'm quite trusting anyway, but I think certainly my partner wasn't so open and curious. So it took a little while to kind of like put all the pieces of the puzzle together in terms of how she was explaining it. She does a very good job of relating it to the actual issues that Isadore was having. And that was, there was always a kind of explanation which actually, for me, made sense. It wasn't, it didn't necessarily go with what other people had said. It was, some of it was actually quite different and quite like, okay, but it was always like, okay, I can get why that would be. And I'd ask many other follow-up questions because I'm naturally curious and I wanted to test actually her knowledge and test that, you know, okay, well, how does this work then? And what about if it's this then? And how can it not be that? So this is how we kind of, this was like the ground that we kind of began on, which I think is a very healthy space. And she was very good. She's incredibly good at dealing with cautionary kind of the cautionary parent approach. She's obviously had a lot of experience with that.
Many
She
people have
knows
had
how to hold that.
many people have had your experience in addition to just the difficulties.
Yeah,
Going to this person and that person and investing a lot of time and investing
money.
a lot of energy, money, and nothing changes and nobody can explain anything. Were you surprised at her ability to explain Isadore's symptoms? I notice a lot of parents, for the first time ever, somebody has explained, oh, this is why your child is having this difficulty.
Yeah, and it was almost at times I was like, this feels too convenient to be true. How can this be? So, that is a natural process I think you go through with something that is actually quite profound and life changing. How can it be that simple? How can it be all that connected to this? So yeah, I was very surprised. I mean, I was quite like flabbergasted by how she had knowledge of pretty much absolutely everything to do with the physical body and the sort of emotional responses in the social environment as well. That was what was convincing for me because I haven't had that anywhere, not even remotely anywhere else.
So she was able to relate the physical challenges with the social and emotional challenges.
Yeah, yeah,
When did you
yeah.
first realize, when did you first see progress that made you think, oh, wow, this is actually working?
Um, I think the first progress report in my head came was when he started actually his relationships with other kids started to change and he was suddenly able to have relationships and other kids actually wanted to have a relationship with
Mm,
him
mm.
and I was like, okay, that's new, where's that come from then?
And let me
And of
ask you
course
this. There was no special training in how to have a relationship, or he wasn't given tips and tricks. He just spontaneously
it
became
was
able
very
to socialize.
spontaneous. it was
Spontaneous.
it was very spontaneous that suddenly it was interesting because it wasn't like he was changing any kind of behavior. He just automatically kind of became almost more magnetic in a weird way. It was
Well,
almost like,
sorry to interrupt, but they say when somebody's uncomfortable with themselves, and if you're in pain and discomfort all the time, it's hard to be a sociable person.
yeah,
Maybe it's that simple.
yeah. Yeah, I think that actually he got really comfortable in himself and he actually came into himself and he was
Mm,
able to then like see, oh, there's another person out there. It's not just me and my little world. And
mm,
that's the problem he'd had. He didn't know how to relate to other kids because he was kind of in his own little self-contained bubble in a way, to the extent where he'd have major problems with physical boundaries, wasn't aware of when he shouldn't be stepping into somebody else's kind of desk space or touching
mm.
other people's property and stuff like this. So there was suddenly a kind of like, oh, it's me and that person over there. And you could really see that. And so it was, the kids around who hadn't been interested on the street suddenly started, wanting to hang out with him.
Oh,
And I was
wonderful.
like, okay.
That's a huge gain right there.
It was, I mean, yeah, because we hadn't had that. So there wasn't, it was such a pressurized space anyway, because it was us trying to, entertain him, avoid all of the traps of things like TVs and stuff like this, which we didn't want to make his symptoms any worse, especially things like the focus and the we knew that from Linda actually that, him using all the energy up through looking at a screen would actually on an oxygen level take that energy away from other parts of him where he needed that oxygen. So
Hmm.
we were kind of aware of all this. So we were kind of like, we really do need, him to begin to have relationships with the kids, not just for him, but for us as well. So it took the pressure off us because it's these sorts of situations that you deal with as parents are incredibly stressful, and I think unless you're in that situation, you don't realize actually how much of an impact it has on your actual day-to-day life. So anyway, he was having these relationships with other children, but also, we weren't having to repeat ourselves as much. It was like there was moments of him being able to kind of notice that we were there asking him to do something, and we could have then a back and forth dialogue about things, as opposed to, actually in the end getting angry because you'd asked 100 times for him to do, basic things like putting your socks on in the morning. And when he was younger, we would have to do it ourselves because you couldn't even have that dialogue. There was no way you could even kind of get anything moving. So, um,
How about
and
physics?
yeah.
So that's the social and sort of the perceptive cognitive changes. How about the just sheer physical changes? How did his physicality, how's that changed?
So his spine has gone through phases. So it got better, and it's when he has a growth spurt, it puts pressure on the diaphragm again, and then it gets more curved. So we've got to kind of keep on managing that backwards and forwards, and that's useful to know because obviously, with all life situations, it's not like this uphill, always going to be an uphill kind of progress advancement. You've got to be prepared that things will shift and go backwards. So that has been something that has improved. And now with the growth spurts, we've got to kind of wait and then allow it to improve again.
So,
So yeah,
pardon to interrupt, but to explain this for people that are new to all this, um, one of the causes of curvature of the spine is the fact that the diaphragm is not keeping pace with the growth of the body. So
yeah,
if you have a diaphragm that's deficient in some way and your body gets bigger and the diaphragm hasn't grown apace, the spine will come under stress. So he's a growing boy, so he's going to go through many phases of growth. So it's wonderful that you know that the diaphragm needs to be nurtured on an ongoing basis, and that will help him keep pace and ultimately will help his spine quite a bit.
absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing, that actually it is an ongoing, I don't think this is going to be necessarily forever, obviously, but it is at the moment very much like an ongoing journey around strengthening and letting that diaphragm, expand with the blood so that it feeds, the rest of the body and the brain. But I do think, it has improved and it's gone back and then it's improved. So it's doing this constant kind of backwards and forwards, but we've seen it improve through this work. So we are quite in trust that it's going to go that way again. We just got to keep going with it, really. So, it's, um, I mean, for us though, I think really the spine has been more secondary. I think it's more the social side that we were more concerned about, and the capacity to focus on a task, and all of these were the real deep concerns that we had, really.
So he's
But I mean,
so he's
she's worked with lots of different areas. I mean, she's worked with the joints, she's worked with the diaphragm. Obviously, the crawling is a big part of it as well. And but these are very simple things. It's not. This is also what was quite deceptive at first. You're like, okay, it's that simple that you just do the. How does nobody else know about this? Why is it working but nobody else? So it is a little bit of a kind of awakening process that you go through when you, as a parent, when you meet Linda, because you do have to start to rethink things and be prepared to open your mind a little bit about. you know, how things are really out there. And so, yeah, but we've now got a real sense. What one of the, I think for me in particular, what I've really gained is a real understanding of the interconnectedness of his body, actually, and not just his, but my own, and understanding how things actually relate. And that is quite a new thing, that nobody else seems to really understand. It's quite profound. That is not knowledge that's really out there. Um, and that's why I feel quite passionate about doing this today, actually, with you, because I do think it's so important that this knowledge is out there for people, um, so that they can not have to live with what we've had to live with, that they can move on with their lives and their kids can move on with their lives. That's how I see it. But yeah, the simplicity of the things that she teaches, and the fact that you don't have to go and see her like for a year, like a massive expense, which other people are charging a huge amount for things that don't work, whereby she's not. And so there's a kind of there's a real honesty there. I think that's the thing you get with Linda. You get like a real honest deal, if you know what I mean. You know
Yeah.
the terms, and you don't feel like you're being ripped off,
Yeah.
which you
Yeah.
do with many other practitioners who claim to help who don't.
And the other thing too, I've heard this from a lot of families, is she first of all explains things so that you have a model for understanding what the source of the problem is and what the solution is. And then she shows you things that you can do at home to help your child. And they're not complicated. You have to do them, of course, but it's not some onerous, incredibly complicated, difficult thing you have to go through. It's pretty straightforward, and she explains it very well. And and then one of the reasons you don't have to go and see her, for 100 years, is you become the therapist in a sense, on the physical side. You help your child um, address these physical issues through, as you mentioned, crawling, and I imagine you do the pressures as well. Um,
Yeah,
and so that's part of it. It's not that you can go and Linda waves a magic wand and everything becomes perfect. You're
yeah.
educated and given the tools so that you can take care of your child.
Yeah, that is at the heart of it. That's why it's not endless sessions. I think that if a child has more, deeper issues, then it's going to require more work. But for sort of the generalized or autism sort of spectrum issues, you're not going to be in that relationship forever. That's quite a relieving thing, really. I think when but you do have to do the work. Yeah, absolutely. And that can be the biggest challenge initially, but she's very supportive on that level. That's one of the things that she helps address as well, actually. So, and it's simple, it's not complicated. And these are things that you can do, and in a way where it's not like it's inconceivable for you to do these things, even
Right.
though it's challenging with challenging children. There is ways around this. So
And
um,
Linda's had tremendous experience with extremely challenging children, so
yeah,
she can give you advice on,
yeah,
okay, how do you proceed with this? How
yeah.
does Isadore feel about the different things that he's asked to do now, the crawling?
Well, initially, I have to be honest. He absolutely hated going to see Linda, not because he hates Linda, but because he absolutely hated to be put in one place and doing these things. That was the biggest challenge initially. Like his absolute resistance, total resistance to it. It was very difficult. I would say for the first few months, really. But we saw that through, and now there is no reaction, no arguments, no resistance. It's so smooth, and that is quite profound. That just shows the kind of changes that he has now undertaken himself within himself. to get to a place where he's not in a battle, an eternal battle, which is what it was all the time, really.
Mm.
Yeah, so this is where he's at now, kind of a sense of there's a sort of more grace in him, I think, around it.
Mm. And I know with a lot of the children, they have anxiety. They're prone to become very anxious very quickly. Um, how is that? Was that a situation with Isidore? No, he's not that
So,
kind of guy.
no,
Good
Isidore
for him.
Isidore's quite different in that sense. He's quite very confident, uh, and didn't have any anxiety for. But I've seen kids that have.
For
It's
sure.
not. I know about that, but no, his issues are more like too high functioning. Moving from this to that to next, almost like too much potential, too many possibilities,
And then
too much, always.
and then as you also mentioned, he was in himself so much, his socialization was not good.
Yeah, so he's a hoarder as well, so he accumulates, like, I mean, tremendous amounts of stuff. So, we have to just not buy it, but it doesn't matter. He somehow seems to accumulate. I don't know what it is, but he's just, yeah, that's just who he is. And then he's got this kind of sense of holding on to it all, holding on within himself, and not really like wanting to kind of um not really wanting to kind of be almost like have a relationship with another human being. It's more a relationship with himself,
Mhm.
how you would expect like someone who really doesn't, who's not really operating in reality at some level.
Well, I mean,
So,
that's where the term autism came from.
oh really? I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
aut self,
That's
fully
interesting.
self-involved, which
Right.
if somebody's perceptual organs and social capacities,
Yeah.
if they're interfered with by the all the the lack of integration,
Mm.
and the discomfort that comes from that, that tends to make a when we're not feel when we're not feeling well, we don't really want to have a lot of conversations with people.
Yeah.
Want to engage with
And
people. You have
and
to
in a
feel
child,
well.
you can't, yeah, but in a child, you don't know that because they can't articulate that to you. All you see is the symptom, and you can't get beyond that. So, it's confusing for that. But now I kind of understand that he's in this, well, he's not now. I mean, you should see him. I mean, the other week he was organizing a shop at the end of the road, you know, gathering all the other kids from the road to come, and he's the leader. He was the leader in that. I mean, this is not something you could even imagine what he would have done 2 years ago, or even a year ago, actually. Quite profound changes, like really coming into who he is now, as opposed to this kind of protective wall of this is just where I'm staying, and I'm not experimenting too much outside of that. I mean, he's a big experimenter in other ways, but not with people. That's how
Mm,
it was. He
mm,
just didn't know his ground there. But now he has that ground. And it was, you always think, well, could it have been something else? But no, it wasn't, because you could really see the gradual changes um, from the work that was happening. You could actually perceive that.
Yeah, it's a funny story. Very often, a child will have, very serious difficulties. No one's helping at all. They'll go to Linda. Bit by bit, the child gets better. And then the doctors say, oh, it would have happened anyway.
Mm.
And it's like, really?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. But
yeah.
that's not the case because,
We have a lot of trouble giving credit to nature.
yeah,
We don't, fresh air, sunshine, those are such
yeah,
trivial things. And we're more interested in the machinery, some complex device that, is very expensive. That's very alluring. But nature seems a little, maybe not so
yeah,
impressive. And yet nature's the real power. Um,
yeah.
uh,
The simplicity of just moving the body in a certain way and going through patterns that the body hasn't, the missteps or whatever you could say. This is not the same crawling that everybody else has suggested, you see.
right.
I did ask because I've also one of the first people we went to was also recommending crawling, some sort of crawling, and but that wasn't effective. So, the crawling she does is very different. I need to emphasize that because otherwise people think, well, they can go anywhere and get the crawling done. And actually that's not the case because there's different types of crawling and it's a very specific way that she's learned over the years, I assume, that this actually needs to happen.
I'm so
So,
I'm so glad you brought that up because I remember I brought somebody to Linda. His father was declining, and as soon as he heard crawling, he assumed that he knew everything about it because he'd seen it in the gym. And we had another
mm,
person that I brought to Linda, same situation, except it was a husband and wife. And the husband was really, I mean, he'd lost the ability to have conversations. He had his driver's license taken away. I mean, he was done. And
wow. Mm,
through the crawling and the pressures, uh, he's back to telling jokes, engaging with his family. He got his driver's license back, not just because he crawled, but because he crawled the way Linda showed him
yeah,
to. She's
yeah,
sort of the I don't know what to call it, the Paganini of crawling,
yeah,
the Jimi Hendrix of crawling, the
yeah,
Einstein. She's the Einstein of crawling.
yeah,
And crawling is when when you are reforming somebody's movements, it's it's not just a matter, hey, get on the floor and crawl. You're just going to reinforce the problems the person has. So
yeah.
Linda's crawling methodology is extraordinary, and again, simple. She doesn't ask you to stand on your
Yeah,
head or do some crazy thing, but she will make
no,
a lot of corrections.
yeah, yeah, and of course for Isadore, that wasn't in any way who likes to do his own thing. He loves to sing while he was doing the crawling, and it took a long time for us to control that response in him that was very natural, which is also very beautiful. He wants to
Yeah,
sing when we're doing,
why
but
not?
at the same time, yeah, exactly. But this isn't what is required in order for the shifts to happen in his brain and with his body. So, she's very good at managing that, and being able to kind of, you know, allow some space when he's really not in that place where, because he's also quite fiery and he can be he could be, but it's so much less now. He could be quite aggressive at times as well. So there was times when that just not, he had to be able to sing, and then there's times when actually, you know she can be a little bit firm. But I think the thing that she always says to me, that because I'm not always in the space when she's doing the work with Isadore, because we worked out that actually it's better if I'm a little bit further away
Mhm.
and observing from a distance. Otherwise, he tends to play off me a little bit, which is useful to know but you can trust her to do that work without you being like fully present all the time. Of course, the first few sessions I was there, but then when you know what she's doing, then you can step back and yeah, she's just got this way of being able to kind of yeah, just know when the time is now and when it's not. And like I said, she would notice the changes perhaps before me sometimes,
Mhm.
obviously, because she's
Mhm.
looking out for them. And then when she'd say, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, I've seen that. And then you have to check yourself, is that something I'm just following because I'm convincing myself
Yeah.
because somebody's telling me who's very knowledgeable? But so I am the sort of person that questions these things. I don't just blindly believe people. And yet that was the case because these were changes that would happen elsewhere. Like he'd start actually asking her questions, as opposed to resistance or nothing. He'd be engaging with her, and then for her, that would be, oh, he did this today. And I'd be like, oh, well, that's definitely new, you see.
Linda's visual acuity, what she can see
Yeah,
in other people is extraordinary, and also
yeah,
she has great patience and tolerance with the
yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
idiosyncrasies of difficult people, and
I
she's
mean, the tolerance levels are she is, you know, is yeah, beyond the normal and average, or even yeah. I mean, you've got to be a special sort of person to deal with what gets thrown at her. And I mean, Isadore would say some of the most horrendous things sometimes as well. It's very embarrassing sometimes being around children that are very honest and don't have any kind of
Filter,
social,
no filter.
limits or boundaries on anything. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, that's also part of the issues that we had. Absolutely no boundaries. And so he would say absolutely, but nothing phased Linda and nothing, yeah, it was embarrassing at times, but she wasn't embarrassed. She just saw the symptoms for what they were and saw him beyond those symptoms, which again is what you want with a practitioner. You want your child to be really fully seen as opposed to, you know, addressed as though they're the problem. She doesn't address it in that way. She sees it as, as a sort of more, I don't know, she just sees it as a mechanical thing in many ways, actually. And that's exactly what it
yeah.
is. That is
Impersonal.
quite unusual.
It's coming from an impersonal situation
Yeah.
that the child really doesn't have any control over until
Yeah.
there's some relief. And then
I
once there's
know. And
relief, the problems go away. They're not coming
yeah.
from, they're not trying to be contrary. I joke with Linda sometimes that, and I think she's starting to accept this. I say, you're kind of like the Mary Poppins of therapy.
Mm.
I don't know if you know that Mary Poppins movie where,
Yeah,
where,
yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
she arrives and just, knows how to deal with everything and
Yeah.
makes the children feel hopeful and happy and um,
Yeah.
she
Yeah,
has
no,
this.
she is, you know, she is like that. You do feel, I mean, this is, and the thing is, you learn so much. I've learned so much that I needed to know about, from just my son having these problems. I feel very grateful for that knowledge because I feel like it's gold dust, and I feel like very few people have that knowledge, and it's precious, really, and it needs to be circulated because it changes people's lives, and that's the thing that I feel passionate about really here. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't feel like there was actually a real need for that information to get more widely circulated, and I do. I think that you know how that happens is difficult sometimes because there's so many different stories out there about what narratives out there about what creates things like autism and even back curvatures as well. But fundamentally, that's what needs to happen. This information needs to get out there, and the simplicity of it needs to get out there as well. That it's not some crazy, expensive thing. Anybody can do it. Absolutely, anybody can do it. Really, once you've been taught precisely what you need to do, then anybody can do this, and it's forgiving as well. That's the other beautiful thing about her work. While you don't, there is a need to get it precise. You can work your way towards that precision. It doesn't have to be overnight. So that's also reassuring, as well, I think. So yeah, I mean, he is a different child because of her, and while he doesn't appreciate it, of course, he will do later down the line, when he looks back and he remembers this time that was excruciating for him at some level, but now he's like free of that, and he doesn't really appreciate that. But that's the beauty of it. Really, that's the beauty of it.
Well, it's the nature of children to be heedless,
Yes.
they're just the way they are. And one last point, and then I'll let you go. And thanks for the time. This is useful to you as well in your own health and your own life. That's what I found. Even if you're quite healthy, we all have little things that we want to get better at. And
Yeah.
it's a way to maintain your own health. We've seen it, as I mentioned, that one story, a man that really lost pretty much all cognitive functioning
Yeah.
got it back through this. So I hate to present it as a cure-all, but then I also say there's no condition that fresh air and sunshine doesn't help.
Yeah.
Whatever the condition is, it will not hurt and it may help.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And I think now Isadore's getting to a place where he's better. Then it's for me to focus actually on doing it myself, because I also know that I have, uh, maybe not joint issues now, but I know that that's a potential issue for me, and I know that that's going to really help me. Um, make sure those issues are not going to materialize later when I'm older. So I would like to focus it on myself as well at some point and do that
Good,
work myself, you
good.
know,
Are you crawling?
not yet.
Not
But
yet.
that's because I've got to get a 10-year-old crawling,
I
you know,
know, I know, I know.
later down the
But you know it's
line.
there. You know it's there, and you
That's the thing. You know it's there, yeah. Once you've learnt it, then you understand that it's there and you can go to it when you've got the space in your life to do that, you know.
good.
So,
All
mm,
right. Well, Maya, thank you so much for this. I think this is going to really help
good.
parents who've been like you through everything and wondered
Mm,
if there was ever going to be an answer or a solution or an
yeah,
understanding even. And would there ever be any progress? And it's clear there can be progress.
yeah, yeah. And I really want to encourage all parents out there just to go and speak to her and listen to what she has to say, even if it's just to understand. You know, even if you can't afford to do the work, even though it's not that expensive, just to listen to what she has to say, because even just that on its own is quite life changing, really. And so I think that there's just a small dose of Linda is enough actually to really kind of create a big butterfly effect
Mhm.
in whomever it is that's receiving that, you know, from her. So that's what I would say. Encourage.
And
Mm,
we have the YouTube channel now, so there's over 100 videos, so people can really um,
good.
immerse themselves
Yeah.
in her thinking, her way of thinking. Well,
Yeah.
great, Maya. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah,
And
you too. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
glad to hear about Isadora.
He's good. I'm so pleased, honestly. It's so good to have Linda in the village. I mean, I think that was the reason we moved down here, to be honest. I don't think there was another reason. I think
Yeah,
that was why.
I would move if I had a problem of this nature. I would move to Forest Row
Yeah.
or East
And
Grinstead or something.
people do that for her because of her. I know that. So it is how it works. So yeah, all the luck with getting it out there and everything else, Ken. I think you're doing great work, honestly.